أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Verily, all praise is due to Allah. We praise Him, we seek His aid, and we ask for His forgiveness. We seek refuge in Allah from the evils of our own selves and from the evils of our own actions. And whomsoever Allah guides, none can misguide. And whomsoever Allah leaves astray, none can guide back to the correct path. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We testify there is no deity worthy of our worship except for Allah, who is alone, no partnership, and never has and never will be another. And we bear witness that Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, is the last and the final prophet of Allah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, brothers and sisters, friends and family, everybody tuning in to the live stream, everybody joining us for the Zoom meeting. Thank you again for joining us for our Sunday discussion, where we will be continuing of the reading and the further discussion about Al-Muhaddithat, the women scholars in Islam. Last week we had ended at page number 25, where the public authority of the hadith narrated by women is the section where we had left off from last time. So with that, we'll go ahead and continue there, and then open up the discussion and read until a good stopping point. Inshallah, I think page 35 is where we will. Maybe we may read a couple pages after that, considering the time. Bismillah. But let's go for now. Let's go ahead and jump in. Bismillah. So the public authority of hadiths narrated by women. As we have seen, the soundness of a hadith was not in the least affected by whether a man narrated it or a woman. The importance of the question of the soundness of hadiths rests on the tendency of the Prophet ﷺ's precepts and practice to become the foundation of legal rulings and social norms. On this question also of the public authority of hadiths, the great imams of the science made no distinction on the basis of the narrator being a man or a woman. Imam Shafi, reported by Rabi ibn Sulaiman, says, quoting, "Someone asked me, define for me the least by which a proof will be affirmed on the scholars so the individual report can be proven over them. And I said, the report of a single person from a single person until it reaches the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or someone after him, i.e. a companion. The report of a single narrator will not be proof until it gathers some things, and that the narrator is reliable in his religion, well known for truthfulness in his speech, that he is one who understands what he narrates, that he knows what can change the meaning of the hadith, or is among those who transmit the hadith with its exact wordings, just as he heard it, and does not transmit the meaning only. For if he narrates the meaning only, and he is not aware of what changes the meaning, he will not know perhaps, but that he may change lawful to unlawful. But if he narrates with exact wording, then there will be no fear of his unknowingly changing the meaning. He should know his hadith by heart if he is narrating it from memory, and he should preserve his writings well if he is narrating from writing in notes or book, and if he shares hadith in common with others who are known for being accurate, his hadith should corroborate with their hadith. He should not be a mundalis, i.e. narrating from those whom he has really met, what he has not really heard from them, and he should not be one who ventures to go around narrating from the Prophet ﷺ, what goes against the hadith of people with an established reputation as reliable. And we can illustrate the point with some examples which shows that the women's hadiths were accepted or not as the basis of legal rulings, following the normal methods and not because the narrators happen to be women. Imam Malik, radiallahu anhu, narrates from Sa'id ibn Ashaq ibn Ka'ab ibn Ujra from his parental aunt Zainab bin Ka'ab ibn Ujra that Uraya bint Malik ibn Sinan, sister of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, told her that she came to Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam for permission to return to her parents' family home in the quarter of Banu Khudra. She explained that her husband had gone out in search of his slaves who had run away until they reached the side of Qadrum, where he caught up with them and they killed him. So I asked Allah's Messenger, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, to go to my family because my husband did not leave for me any residence that he owned and no by with which to defray my expenses. Allah's Messenger Sallallahu said, yes. And she said, I moved away until when I was still in the room or in the mosque, he called me back or asked someone to call me back, and I came back. And he asked, what did you say? And I repeated to him the story of my husband's murder. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, stay in your house until the waiting period, the iddah, has passed. She said, I stayed there for the whole waiting period, 4 months and 10 days. She says, when Uthman ibn Affan was the caliph, he called me and asked me about that, and I told him, and then he followed it and judged accordingly. So Uthman ibn Affan, one of the four rightly guided caliphs, ruled at a time when there were many male companions, yet he sought knowledge from a woman. She informed him, and he judged accordingly. Had the report of a woman not been considered sufficient as proof on which to base a ruling, he would not have and could not have judged according to it, and that she was a woman was not considered relevant. Similarly, when a report was rejected as the basis for a ruling, the narrator's being a woman was not a relevant factor. Imam Shokani says, it has not been narrated from any scholar that he rejected the report of a woman on the ground of her being female. There are plenty of sunnahs accepted by the Ummah, and they are based upon the narration of a single female companion. And no one who has acquired a bit of knowledge of the Sunnah can deny this. And this is well exemplified in the case of the Hadith. Fatima bin Qais al-Khatib al-Baghdadi reports that Umar ibn Khattab would not act on her report, though she was a Muslim on the straight path, because her report was opposed to the Quran. Omar said, we are not to leave the book of our Lord and the Sunnah of our Prophet ﷺ for the word of a woman when we do not know for certain whether she preserved the matter fully or not. Now, Omar refused to give a ruling on the basis of Fatima's hadith for the good reason that it contradicted the Quran. And even so, though he and others might have wished that she would have stopped narrating this hadith, he did not try to prevent her from doing so. And what happened with this hadith illustrates the respect according to women in the society of the time and the authority that they enjoyed, in a strong belief in the principle that neither men or women could be prevented from acquiring and transmitting their knowledge and understanding of the religion, and not even if someone of the stature of Omar was opposed. So despite Omar's refusal to act on it, and more importantly, despite the very strong argument against it, i.e., its apparent opposition to the Quran, people continue to record it in their books and to discuss it. And indeed, respect for the hadith was such that, once accepted as sahih by the normal conversations, some scholars and jurists felt obliged to reconcile it somehow with the Quran. So some of the examples of this are the hadith of Fatima bin Qais. And the meaning of Fatima's hadith is that a divorced woman has no right of accommodation and living expenses from her former husband during the iddah, the waiting period before the end of which she cannot remarry. And Fatima bin Qais reports that her husband, Abu Amr ibn Hafs, divorced her finally while away from home. He sent his agent to her with some barley to provide her expenses, and she did not like this. He then said, by God, you do not have any right upon us. She came to God's messenger and recounted the matter to him. And the Prophet ﷺ said, your expenses are not an obligation on him. And Omar ibn al-Khattab, Abdullah ibn Masud, Zayd ibn Thabit, Aisha, and other jurists among the companions held that A divorced woman has a right of accommodation and expenses, whether the divorce is final or provincial, and whether she is pregnant or not. And this is the view also of later scholars and jurists, Ibrahim el Nakhai, Sufyan al-Thawri, Abu Hanifa, and his students, and the rest of the people of Kufa. And their view is based on the following verse of the Quran, Al-Talaq, Surah 65, ayat 1 through 6, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the English translation, O Prophet, when you men divorce women, divorce them for their iddah, and count their iddah accurately, and be wary of Allah, your Lord. Do not force them from their homes, nor should they leave of their own accord, except in the case of blatant indecency, fashiha, and those are the bounds of Allah. You, the one divorcing his wife, do not know. It may be that Allah will later bring about some new affair, i.e., some reconciliation or eventual remarriage. Lodge them, the divorced wives, where you dwell, according to your means, and do not be hurtful to them, so that you may constrain them for forcing them to leave. And if they are pregnant, then spend on them till they deliver their burdens. Then, if they breastfeed the children for you, give them their due payment, consult each other in the normal way, bilal maruf, with further support from the hadith mentioned earlier on Furaya bint Malik, in which she is required to remain in her former husband's home during her iddah period. So, some companions criticized Fatima for narrating the hadith. Aisha did so and explained that the ruling from Fatima was because of some danger for her in staying at her ex-husband's home with her in-laws. And Sayyid ibn Musayyib says Fatima was moved from her house because of her quarreling with her in-laws, but she continued narrating the hadith, which left an impact on later jurisprudence, and some jurists tried to make it fit with the Quran. And they said that the verse of the Quran is referring to a woman divorced provisionally, while Fatima's hadith is about a woman divorced finally. And that is the opinion of Hassan al-Basri, Atta ibn Abi Rabah, Amir al-Sha'abi, Ahmed ibn Hanbal, and Ishaq ibn Rahawiya. And others held that the divorcee has the right to accommodation by the Quranic verse, but by Fatima's hadith, not the right of maintenance. And that is the opinion of Malik ibn Anas, Layth ibn Sa'ad, and Shafi'i. And other jurists derived others different rulings from the hadith of Fatima. A summary and more references we see in this table in particular, which we won't break down, inshallah. It is in the book for someone who is interested to truly get the point or the methodology regarding each person's reference or thought regarding this in particular hadith. But it goes to show that, of course, the amount of reference or precedence that this hadith was given, if, of course, a woman's hadith or a narrating of a hadith was considered to be one way or another being judged by one's gender. So another example is a hadith from Aisha. So this second example concerns a legal effort or legal effect of breastfeeding. A wet nurse is prohibited in marriage to the one who has been breastfed by her, just as his natural mother would be, which in turn means that the restrictions on how the two meet are relaxed. And Aisha narrated that Salim, a slave of Abu Hudayfa, lived with him in his house. Abu Hudayfa's wife, the daughter of Suhail, came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, Salim has attained manhood, and he enters in our house, and I feel that my husband is not at ease about this. And the Prophet ﷺ said to her, give your milk to Salim, and you will become unlawful for him, and then Abu Hudayfa will be at ease. And the daughter of Suhail reports that she did so, and that her husband was then at ease about his being in the house. And this is mentioned in Sahih Muslim and Bukhari. And on the basis of this hadith, Aisha held that if a woman gave her milk to an adult then it would be as if she had been his wet nurse, with the legal effect as explained above, and she was opposed by others among the companions, including other wives of the Prophet ﷺ, and by the Imams of later generation, Abu Hanifa, Malik, and Shafi, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and others, because of the Quranic verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah 2, Ayat 233, where Allah SWT mentions in the English translation, the mothers shall breastfeed their children for 2 whole years. That is for those parents who desire to complete the breastfeeding. So those who opposed Aisha about also relied on a number of hadiths. For example, the Prophet ﷺ saying breastfeeding is out of hunger. This means that only that it is to be considered breastfeeding which satisfies hunger, namely in early infancy before the child turns to solid food. And when the child reaches the age when milk does not satisfy his hunger, then foster mother relationship is not established with that child. And the legal effects to the relationships do not apply. And Ibn Masud has narrated something similar. And Abdullah ibn Zubair was narrated from the Prophet ﷺ, there is no breastfeeding but what enters into the intestines. And Fatima bint Mundhir has narrated from Salama that the Prophet ﷺ had said, only that breastfeeding forbids marriage, which becomes a part of the intestines and happens before the age of weaning. And after citing that hadith, excuse me, that Tirmidhi has mentioned, most scholars from among the companions of the Prophet ﷺ and others hold the opinions that breastfeeding only forbids marriage if it is within 2 years after birth, and what is after the full 2 years, it does not forbid anything. And Abu Ubaidah ibn Abdullah ibn Zama'a narrated that his mother Zainab bint Abi Salama told him that her mother Salama, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, used to say, all wives of the Prophet ﷺ refused to allow anyone to enter upon them by that breastfeeding by which Aisha allowed, and they said to Aisha that was a permission particular to the wife of Abu Hudayfa, and no one can enter upon us by such breastfeeding and see us. So despite the opposition to it, Aisha continued to narrate the hadith and be guided by it, and the jurors did not see any harm in citing it. Ibn Abi Mulaika has reported that Qasim ibn Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr told the hadith to Aisha of Aisha to him. And he adds, I endured 1 year or about 1 year not narrating this hadith to anyone, and I was afraid of doing so. Then I met Qasim and I said to him, you narrated to me a hadith which I could not dare to narrate to anyone. And Qasim said, what is that? And I told him, and he said, you can narrate it from me that Aisha narrated it to me. So, three, excuse me, three important points can be drawn from the foregoing discussion. First, in the time of the companions, the desire to understand and implement the deen was stronger than anything else. Before there was any established division by doctrine, sect, or political faction. The people did not suffer from loyalties competing with loyalty to Quran and the Sunnah, and so they were able to differ without dividing, to disagree on particular matters without loss of mutual respect and solidarity. And second, where there was discussion of how to understand and implement hadiths, the weight given to someone's knowledge or understanding was not a function of the individual's being a man or a woman. If a broad consensus accrued around one's understanding rather than another, it was not on account of so-called patriarchal attitudes. The historical evidence will not sustain the view that the learned companions or their successors or the jurors and scholars who were followed, i.e., the Imams, after they interpreted the guidance of the Quran and the Sunnah consciously or unconsciously to serve vested interests of political, economic, or gender privilege. And then third, the material on the basis of which decisions were taken and directions given about how to live by the guidance was in the public domain. People were required to bring it and to keep it public. And the seniority of some companions, the positions of power some had arisen to, and the fact that some had been especially close to the prophet, so we saw him by relationship of birth or marriage did not enable them to prevent the circulation of material or of interpretations as they oppose. And the greater authority some enjoyed was not mysterious or charismatic. It derived from strictly known and demonstrable qualities, breadth and depth of knowledge, intelligence, and understanding, combined with firm belief, God weariness, and of righteousness. And from the examples given thus far, in the text or in the notes, it should be clear that Muslim scholars took great pains to record as much as they could of this material, of how it passed from whom to whom, who agreed with one interpretation or another, and who disagreed, and why. And in the next chapters, we will see how the women in the Ummah were included with this scholarly activity. We're there. Now we enter into chapter 2. Bismillah. Let's look ahead here and see if we can. Yeah, let's get it. Let's just read 2 more pages here, and then we'll close for our discussion, inshallah. So, women as seekers and students of hadith is where we begin for chapter 2. We have seen the law places no formal uh, impediment in the way of women acquiring the knowledge to understand and to practice Islam. Rather, it is a duty for them to do so, just as it is for the men. But a law, whether it permits or forbids, while it has educative force, does not suffice by itself to enable the intended outcome. Also needed alongside the law is a wider societal effort to establish an ethos that welcomes and enables what the law intends. So, in the first part of the chapter, I review how women were urged from the outset of Islam to learn the religion and how the example was sustained in the period that followed by the caliphs and the other rulers, by the ulema and the men and the women who enjoyed authority. It also sustained it was it it was sustained also by the dedication of the women themselves to that task, to traveling in the path of knowledge, to overcoming shyness. And the second part, I set out the ways in which women acquired the necessary skills to preserve, quote unquote, the knowledge by committing hadith to memory and then to writing. So next is the disposition to teach women. So the duty to teach the Prophet, someone's primary role was not as a lawgiver or ruler, but as a teacher of the deen, where law and rule were as means to that end. Surah Al-Jumu'ah, Surah 62, Ayat 2 mentions this, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the English translation, He it is who sent among the unscriptured a messenger from among them, reciting to them his verses, purifying them, and teaching them the scripture and the wisdom. And before that, they had certainly been in manifest error. So the duty of embodying Islam as a way of life entailed lifelong sacrifice for the messenger himself, sallallahu, and for his household. The Quran alludes delicately in Surah Al-Azab, Surah 33, ayats 28 to 29, to the occasion when within that household there was ill feeling, perhaps reluctance to go on enduring hardship, perhaps desire for recompense in the form of present advantage or privilege. So the choice was to put to the wives of the Prophet ﷺ either him with hardship or and the supreme recompense hereafter, are parting from him with some goods of this world. And in the narration of Jabir, the Prophet ﷺ first put the choice to Aisha, advising her not to decide hastily, but to take counsel with her parents. She said, Will I consult my parents about you, O Messenger of Allah? Rather, I choose God, His Messenger, Sallallahu and the hereafter, and I ask you not to inform any of your wives about what I have said. And the Prophet Sallallahu said, no one among them will ask me, but I will tell her. God has not sent me as Mu'anit, who makes it hard for people, or as a muta'amit, one who lets other people fall into error. Rather, He has sent me to teach people and to make the straight way easy for them. And we don't know what Aisha had in mind in asking what she did, but we do know his motive for refusing her because he states it himself. He was bound by his primary duty as teacher to communicate to people whatever would help them to choosing the right path. And the first stage of teaching, of course, in regards for the educating of children, is the upbringing of children. An essential condition of doing that well is to respect and love the children, girls as well as boys, and it required some effort to change attitudes that have become deeply ingrained. Allah's Messenger has said that Allah has disliked three things from you: being disobedient to mothers, bearing infant girls alive, and the habit of taking and not giving. And Abdullah ibn Amr, eminent companion and son of the second caliph, heard a man wishing his daughters dead, perhaps because he was worried about the economic burden. And Ibn Omar was angered and said, is it you who provide the provision? And Uqaba ibn Omar narrates that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, do not be adverse to daughters, for they are precious treasures that comfort your heart. Aisha narrates that he said, whoever is tested with anything of these girls, they will be his screen from the fire. Anas ibn Malik narrates that the Messenger ﷺ said, whoever brings up two girls until they become adults, he and I will become close to one another like this. And he brought his fingers together to indicate closeness. And Abu Sa'id al-Khudri narrates that he said, whoever has three daughters or three sisters or two daughters or two sisters, and then he is good company for them and is weary of Allah in regard to them, he will have paradise. And the Prophet's teachings was remembered by his community. Salih ibn Ahmed, son of the great Muhaddith, and Juris said, whenever my father Ahmad ibn Hanbal had a daughter born to him, he would say, the prophets upon them be peace were the fathers of daughters. And he would say about the daughters, there has come in hadith the reward that is known. And the Sunnah is particular about treating sons and daughters equally. Al-Bazar has cited the hadith from Anas ibn Malik that there was with the Prophet ﷺ a man whose son came to him. The man kissed the boy and sat on his lap. Then his daughter came up and he sat her in front of him. And Allah's Messenger ﷺ said to the man, why did you not treat them equally? And with that, let's go and close here on page number 38. And we will go ahead and continue next week. Just like I on everyone for joining us. And we hope to see you next week. Allahumma subhanahu wa bihamdi ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.